Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I'm typically your host, Joe Kuzma, but I'm going to step aside today. I'm going to kick this show over to a good buddy of mine. Yins met him over the last week. He was on a few shows, including the one with special guest Rob Rossi. His name is Ron Liplock of the Pittsburgh Sports Daily Bulletin, and Ron himself has a very special guest today as well. So before I have Ron hop on here and to take control of the reins, just want to tell all the folks there was a small break. We got a lot of shows out last week, but geez, there was no way that we were going to try and tackle something in the middle of the free agency. Are you kidding me? We would have recorded something and had to stop midway through our show just to keep up with all of the different moves. Absolute insanity, and we're going to discuss even more of that, not only with Ron and his special guest today, but also in the coming days as we have a lot of content coming to you folks. A few more shows, so be sure to keep an eye and an ear out for those. And Ron, well, why don't you take over from here?
So guys, I'm excited to have today Jacob Klinger, who's here from Penn Live. He's the reporter on the Steelers, and the reason why I would love to have Jacob on the call today was because he has such really interesting personal stories about sort of how the Steelers operate inside the locker room, the personalities of the players. So I wanted to sort of touch base with Jacob, get his feel for the offseason, and get a sense of sort of how he goes about his story. So welcome, Jacob. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, starting from the start here, give me a little sense of how you got started covering the Steelers and a little bit about how your approach to covering the team is a little bit different from maybe some of the other guys that we know out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll readily admit that I am not the biggest X's and O's guy. I think I do enough, understand the game well enough, and watch enough film that I can at least, fundamentally understand what's happening in front of me. But it's not my strength, and I admit that to anyone who would question it, including you. But yeah, I'm definitely more interested in the storytelling aspect of covering a sports team, or covering anything for that matter, because the reader, typically a sports fan, most likely of the Steelers, is really invested in this whole narrative of the season, beyond the season, really, whether it's week to week or day to day, whatever the case might be. And I think I can offer something that's both good and different if I get into, how these guys operate as people, as a unit, just any interpersonal dynamics. Really, just anything beyond, hey, this is why they're good at their job, that is to tackle or block or throw or catch or, any combination thereof. So that's always in my interest, and I think it's my strength. And again, to me, because it's ever present, but Penn Live is relatively new to the Pittsburgh media market. So we really only got super invested on an individual level about 2 years ago. Coming up on 2 years, and they hired me to cover the Steelers. And so it's really important that as often as possible we offer something that is good and different.
And it definitely is. It's a definitely unique approach in the sense that you're really covering the team in a unique way. You're getting inside the locker room. And there are guys out there who do that, of course, as everyone does. But I think you have a unique approach. No, and one of the reasons, again, I reached out to you is because this is something that really stood out to me in terms of who you are as a reporter. It never occurred to me, X's and O's or otherwise. It just stood out to me that, when I read your articles, I read more about player personalities, player camaraderie, things like that, which I think, fans more and more are getting into as they feel like they're getting access to these players in different ways through social media. They almost expect it and embrace it in a different way. So I think that's exciting, and I think it sort of lends to an interesting segue. We were talking earlier about free agency and Timmons leaving. I know being someone who had sort of some access to these guys from from being in the locker room at times and being on the field with them. How much does a loss of a player like Timmons affect this Pittsburgh team with some young guys on the defense? Do you worry about, as far as the Steelers are concerned, a sense of leadership or a sense of anything in that loss?
Well, in terms of explicit on-field leadership duties, Ryan Shazier has been taking signals for a while now, so it's not as crushing in that respect as one might initially think. More generally, I mean, I think they have enough people who have grown into, I guess, what you would call leadership roles on that defense, whether it be Cam Hayward up front, Mike Mitchell in the secondary, Ryan Shazier to a pretty real extent in the heart of the defense.
Right.
Shoot, even Ross Cockrell's, approaching some level of experience at this point if they're able to retain him. So it'll hurt. Also, James Harrison's been playing for a minute.
Yeah.
It'll
a few minutes. Yeah.
Them, but probably half hour. But yeah, it'll hurt them. But kind of coming back to what we were just talking about, Vince Williams is a super respected guy in that locker room. He holds down the corner of the room that also includes James Harrison and Antonio Brown and no one else. And in a very literal sense, he's with those guys. They've been better at their jobs for longer, but
yeah, you talked a little bit. I remember in your article you talked a little bit about that locker room, and I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that on the show here, but you talked a little bit about sort of the real estate of that locker room and who gets to sit where and why and how that works. You want to talk a little bit about that and sort of the fun things that you uncovered as you did that story?
Yeah, okay, so this is fun. Thank you. Yeah, the locker room neighborhood story kind of came about as one of those lucky accidents that happens as a reporter that you just kind of have to smile about. You don't even get to pat yourself on the back, because I was working on a story about it was for week 4 when Le'Veon Bell was coming back, and Le'Veon Bell is also a pretty large personality, and obviously he's a huge part of the team. So I wanted to get into all right, obviously it was unfortunate for you guys that he could not be taking the ball from Ben Roethlisberger in one way or another in the first 3 weeks. But the NFL suspensions also affect what time you can spend around your teammates. And with the type of suspension that he had, it was really just he couldn't be on the field in practice. I'm not sure, I forget if he was able to go to meetings or not, but the point is, they would miss the immediate pre-practice and post-practice Le'Veon in the locker room time, in addition to the practice time. So I was asking, about what they were missing out on and what they were getting back. And then Darius Hayward-Bay sort of went into this spiel about how, and he's in the part of the locker room near Bell, where he said that basically that area was like the suburbs. It was like his neighborhood back in Darius Hayward-Bay's neighborhood back in California. And these are his words. He's like, I live with the white folks, but it's cool. And that's Le'Veon, because the area of the locker room is some veteran guys, some pretty established guys, Mike Mitchell, William Gay, and then jokes about with homeowners association fees and things like that sort of cropped up organically between Mike Mitchell and Will Gay. And then I was like, okay, there's something to this. What are the other neighborhoods? And, Ben Roethlisberger and all the higher pay offensive linemen apparently are in the gated community. And then there's the kicker's corner that I guess has traditionally been the kicker's corner for a while, but Cam Hayward kind of runs it now. There's a lot of little...
So what happens when they cross neighborhoods in the locker room?
Story. Oh, no, see, that was the thing, is everybody can come and go. Everybody's, welcome, but it's...
With their access fees?
It's it's pretty... Everyone knows, that there are these sort of, different areas. Sometimes you get a story idea and you talk to someone, and they're like, what? No, it's not a thing. but everybody was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely, this is this, that is that." Like, and it was interesting. Like, I think at one point, Vince Williams and James Harrison was referring to his corner as the trap, and Jarvis Jones happened to be like hanging out there while we were just talking about this, and Jarvis was like, "Am I part of it?" And Harrison's like, "No, you're not. Like, you're welcome here. You can hang out and talk, but
you can't own property here." What does it take to move up in the neighborhoods?
I don't know, but I do know that before this season, Cam Hayward was kind of like between the what they would call the gated community with Roethlisberger and the better paid offensive lineman and the kicker's corner, and then he won the corner locker that actually gives him 2 lockers and access to like a little like trap door that has like a mini fridge in it, and he had to beat Chris Boswell in a game of rock paper scissors for it, which is actually a separate story that I wrote about. But Hayward and Greg Warren confirmed to me that it was probably going to be Cam's locker regardless. But they did play the game.
Yeah, he had to go through the motions.
Yeah. So Cam Hayward has a double locker. It is interesting. Once the locker room clears out at the end of training camp and there's only 53 guys plus a practice squad, you see who gets a double locker and who doesn't. And that's not irrelevant. So,
right.
Yeah, just little things like that are fun, man. And then, I don't know, like, it's going to be more fruitful for me and the player and the reader than, like, oh, like, how much cover 2 did you play this week versus last week? I mean, one, they, like, probably not going to be interested in telling me. 2, like, at the end of the day, like, who cares?
Well, and I'm sure the players get to appreciate talking more about this stuff. I mean, they talk about X and O's every day of the week, and there's not to say there's not a huge place for that in the way the team's covered, but I'm sure the players appreciate getting to be known. You know, this is something I actually talk about a little bit, is how somewhat dehumanized players get these days with social media, with fantasy football, with even the No Fun Football League, to be able to be approached and people to actually not only just ask them questions, but report on these guys as real people. I'm sure they appreciate that.
It's something, you I guess you probably wouldn't be surprised, but in the course of having these conversations with people before these stories, or even just afterwards, like explicitly to that point, it's like, Darius Hayward was pretty poignant on this. I talked to him towards the end of the year, and he was like, people think we're superheroes. I was like, dude, y'all literally wear tights, like you're just missing a cape. I mean, it's true, like, that's how these guys are marketed and sold, and if you do forget about, like, the very human aspect of it, it's super easy to dehumanize them. Like, people hate Jarvis Jones. He's a really nice dude.
Yeah, and he gives it his all. If he's not the guy they want him to be on the field, that's not his fault if he's giving it his all. And, it's a shame.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's one of the starkest contrasts. It's like, Jarvis, blah, blah, blah. Well, I mean, he's kind of small and not particularly quick. Steelers just happened to draft him in the first round, and a lot of teams probably had a first round. Like, he's just, he'll talk your ear off about things that are, like, explicitly, like, not great for him. Like, hey, you're a special teams kickoff coverage guy now because you got knocked out of the rotation when the team needed to win. He'll talk about it. So, and he has. I mean, there's stories out there about it. So, I mean, you always appreciate guys that'll talk about whatever, but just as, a one-time sports fan, like, it's really important to remember that they are not robots. So, that's cool.
Well, slipping into a little bit of not so much X's and O's, but just interest in the way the team is going to be structured.
Who's on the team? Yeah, don't get...
Well, and Jarvis probably is not going to be, but tell us a little bit, now that, Timmons is gone, first, was that a surprise, especially considering that there wasn't a huge difference in offers between what Miami offered and what Pittsburgh offered, though a lot of the guaranteed money was certainly different.
Can you... What Pittsburgh offered?
What's that?
Do we know what Pittsburgh offered?
Well, from what I understand, they offered about $5 million a year, and he was offered about 6.5 or so from Miami. I'm not sure of getting my numbers exactly right, but a lot of that was upfront guaranteed in Miami, and I think that's really where the difference was.
I unplugged pretty hard today, but yeah, I mean, if Rosenhaus got him more guaranteed from Miami, then like it just becomes a matter of math, because it's unlikely that he would have become a cap casualty in year 2, but you know. Was it $11 million guaranteed was the number floating around out there?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Especially for a guy in what might be his last contract, you know. So I can understand that.
Right,
now,
that's the point Kevin Colbert made back in February. He's like, this guy's never really been a free agent. We drafted him, we locked him up, and locked him up again. Like,
yeah.
So.
And you know, it's funny because
he definitely wanted to be one of those guys that retired Steelers, but you know, his earning potential is going to diminish pretty greatly in a few years. So. And
it's interesting too. When I spoke to Hardy Nickerson some years ago, and he was he's tested and actually left the Steelers in free agency, the first year of free agency, if I can recall. And he said one of the things that was most exciting for him was being courted and being recruited. He was never courted and recruited in his entire career in football until that free agency piece hit. You know, he went to college, but after that, you know, you're locked down until free agency comes about. And I think that process is, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that, but that process must be really exciting for players to feel like they're recruited and wanted and sold. That's a new experience for a lot of these guys, you know, outside of college.
Yeah, I mean, well, definitely. I don't think it's super relevant in Timmons' case, just in that, you know, if anybody was welcome in Pittsburgh, it was Lawrence Timmons. He was Mike Tomlin's first draft pick. But I think there's something to be said to that from an emotional point of view, especially, and again, not super relevant to Timmons, but for a lot of guys that are floating around on teams that are, you know, somewhere between 4-12 and 10-6 every year, and maybe they have a franchise quarterback, maybe they don't, but you don't know if you're going to win a Super Bowl, so it does make sense to chase the money to a certain extent, and yeah, actually being desired and courted and told X and Y is probably worth something.
Yeah,
I mean, because you do hear about guys that sign for less money than they're offered, too. And I think there's the contending aspect of it, but there's also the emotional. And it never ceases to amaze me what a kneecapped labor force the NFL player collectively is.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you just look around the major sports leagues in the U.S., the NFL Players Union is by far the weakest. And I think part of that's the nature of roster sizes, which, you know, again, are in theory at least negotiable. But we have this various mechanisms to create NFL or close to NFL ready football players, and there's just such a supply of players that an individual, even in the context of a CBA negotiation, can't really look at the big picture that much. So
yeah, and it's surprising. It's surprising how much they struggle to get a voice. I mean, even, you know, sort of jumping around a bit, but even the Martavis Bryant situation where he's been suspended, a lot of these guys who are suspended, there's a certain point where there's a decision supposed to be made by the NFL that's an actual CBA ruling of when they're supposed to be notified of reinstatement. And it's relevant to Pittsburgh now because those time frames often get passed up by the NFL. They don't meet those obligations of deciding within a certain time frame. And the worry now, for me anyway, is that that's going to happen to Bryant too, and it's going to slip too close to the draft, and Pittsburgh's going to have an issue deciding what to do at that spot because they're not going to know. And that's happened with other teams.
It certainly has, and I mean, there's two pieces to this. One is that he is due to get a decision in the next couple of weeks. But, I mean, the Steelers have to do their due diligence and scout out the receiver class anyway. Yeah, I have it down, actually. Today's the 11th, so Monday, actually, he needs to be interviewed by the League and NFL Players Association appointed medical advisor and medical director no later than Monday. It's possible he already has been. And then after the interview, the medical director and advisor send a recommendation to Goodell, are we reinstating him or not? And then 15 days from now, which will be March 28th. Get us up. Goodell's supposed to decide no later than that date. So, I mean, in theory, it's all tidied up well before the Steelers even tear into too many 3-round visits. But in practice, yeah, it could be really difficult for them. So the other end of it is that Rooney's talked about this a couple of times. I mean, last year he told reporters that the owners, as far as he was concerned, were trying to get a rule change that would allow players in Bryant's, year-long to end up in a suspension situation to remain in contact with the team, for support in any number of ways.
Yeah, and that only seems to make sense. If someone's going through something, why isolate them further?
But what's not, and this is very one-sided just because of the nature of the enforcement, but Rooney II said the players union didn't want to go for it, which is absurd to me. But
any reasoning for that?
Well, I know it's the same way. I have Rooney II back in January, February when this came up. I was like, why? And he just said he just said like they just couldn't, they just wouldn't. That sounds like an oversimplification to me. So to answer your question, I don't know. But yeah, on face value, it doesn't make sense.
Well, talking a little bit about inside linebacker here. I know we're jumping around, but it's kind of fun to talk about this stuff. Timmons is gone, so I'm gonna get your feet wet a little bit on the X's and O's conversation here, a little bit.
Automatic debit time, right?
Yeah, exactly. We got to touch this a little bit. We got to put your feet to the fire on this a bit.
I actually like football. Let me be clear.
No, you couldn't cover football teams and not like the sport. So, no question. And it's just curious because, I had some wonder about. They seem to really appreciate Timmons. I think the average fan, while we love Vince Williams and the effort he puts out there, he's not what Lawrence Timmons was. He's certainly not what Shazier is, and potentially a liability in coverage, right? So as far as we know Vince Williams to be versus a guy that like a Shazier or Timmons. If that's the case, the Steelers don't seem to be overly worried about this spot, and that's a surprise. Do you any insight as to why? Do you see them looking at this as a draft solution? Do you see them just being happy with Vince Williams? Or is there a third option about how they look at this position moving forward and looking at it more as almost a hybrid position and bringing in those sub-packages they use so much now, guys like a safety or a corner to really step in for him and have him step off the field at those times?
If there was a guy they were really high on, I could see, someone sort of supplanting sometimes I've had like Robert Golden sort of fill that role, or even I think at one point, in various points, maybe even before my time here, I think they used Shamarko Thomas kind of that way.
And then Gilbert in there a couple times, even the guys here and gone, but they even dropped him in there a couple times.
Yeah, I think that was mostly the matchup tight ends.
Yeah,
it was like one-on-one out of the defensive package as a whole, but I think they like Vince Williams. I think the coaches like Vince Williams. I think the players like Vince Williams. That's not to say that it wouldn't stop them from drafting over him, but I'd be surprised if they use a first-round pick to do so.
What do you think about Hassan Reddick as a first-round pick if he happens to be there? Is that a guy that fans should feel comfortable with, even though he seems to be a little small for the edge, and that doesn't solve their pass rush issue?
Well, I don't think they would use him. I think you'd have to for the Steelers. I think he would be an inside linebacker. In a 4-3, he'd be the weak side. The outside of the three. You know what I'm saying. But
yeah.
I mean, it'd be fine if he drops to 30, and I could see that. I think that's a fine idea. I do think the Steelers have more pressing needs, and it seems that there's a disconnect between my perception of how well Lawrence Timmons covers receivers than Vince Williams does. I don't think either is particularly good at it. But there are certain things you can try and scheme around that. You can try and have the outside linebackers drop and take more of that responsibility. That does complicate things depending on how much James Harrison's going to be on the field, because that's not really his strength either. But I've never taken Lawrence Timmons to be, at least in the 2 years I've been covering him, particularly strong, coverage linebacker. He can hang with some tight ends just fine, but further down the field he gets, the worse he gets. And I think the same probably true for Vince Williams, but I don't think it. Timmons leaving, I don't think caught the Steelers off guard by any means, and I don't think it changes their draft priorities. They're always going to say that they're just going to draft the best available. Take that with a grain of salt. I do anyway. But,
yeah. It's best available in the one or two positions they're going to target that round.
I don't even know if it's a round-by-round position thing, but, I mean, last year was explicit, you know. First round, corner, second round, safety, third round, nose tackles, and places defensive end. Like,
yeah, what a coincidence! What a coincidence! It all fell down as best player of need. Yeah,
right.
Best player of need.
Or, you know, bust 3 as an outside linebacker like that.
Yeah. Well, what do you see first round this year? I mean, what are you looking at? Have you followed the draft at all? Are you looking at any particular guys as?
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, you throw the human interest lead in, and again, I do think that's probably my strength in the beat. Yeah, I do follow the draft quite a bit. I don't think I could do much out if I did. I think it's got to be an edge rusher. Depending on what happens with tackle, maybe look at a corner, but no, I really think it's got to be an outside linebacker.
Any guys you think will fall and that you have your eyes on in that spot in their pick?
Oh man, not really.
I'm looking at a guy like Rivers or Watt, or maybe if McKinley falls due to the shoulder. You know, one of those three guys seems to be a guy that would be.
Watt might be a reach there, but
yeah.
I don't. Yeah, is it Flowers? Am I making up that name?
Well, Rivers.
Yeah.
Rivers and Lawson are guys that I know they like too, but I don't know if they're available at that spot.
Their name. Yeah, no, I mean, I really just think they're going to take the best edge rusher that drops to 30.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you.
The betting man or not, but it just be so hard for them not to, unless there's just, you know, some freak run or lack of a run on a certain position where they say, oh wow, we think, you know, such and such receiver or something is the truth, but I have a hard time seeing it.
So sort of wrapping down here a little bit on the conversation. You know, we're in the midst of free agency. Every fan of the Steelers is, you know, furious as usual because the Steelers haven't signed the top free agent out in the market. And, you know, I think fans forget that that last year no one saw Ladarius Green coming. Years before that, no one saw Mitchell coming or Ferrier coming. The Steelers don't broadcast their interest so much. But, you know, from your vantage point there, any guys you see out there left that you think would surprise the fans in terms of bringing on board or signing?
I mean, look, if fans are going to be surprised, they're probably going to be surprised too. Being perfectly honest with you, because the corner class has gotten thinned out real quick. It's one of those positions where there's a huge demand for a guy that can be a shutdown corner, or you think, you know, is and might develop into one. But there's not a lot of them. And people want to rag on Ross Cockrell, and he's not, you know, great, but he's a decent corner. And there's a lot of bad corners getting playing time out there. And I don't mean bad as in they're bad at their jobs. I just mean they get beat and or can't tackle. There's a lot of that. So to answer your question, in terms of specific names, I'm not going to have specific names for you, but I don't even know what position we might see them go in, because, you know, truthfully, if they think they can find a little, like, niche guy to be that third down safety coming in the dime package, you know, help out a linebacker in a passing situation, yeah, it makes sense for them to do that. I don't know who that guy is, though. But I do empathize with Steelers fans' frustration more this year than I have in other years. Mm-hmm. That being said, just because they have, you know, $20-some million to spend, it's probably down closer to 18 or so now that they've re-signed a few guys. But I do empathize with that boy this year, just in that, like, there is money to spend. But because there's so much money to spend around the league, and the salary cap jumped up by, was it like $18 million or something this year?
Yeah, it's just chasing bigger money again. It's, you know, they're in better position than everyone else is too, and they're not going to overspend. That's not what they do. Yeah. But
again, it's only overspending if the guy doesn't play well. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You splash on a free agent and he changes the game for you. That's fine, but it's hard not to. it's really hard to parse out when you're looking at a team that was legitimately one game away from the Super Bowl.
And any sense?
And it's not.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Do you have any sense from the front office as to whether they feel a sense of urgency with Ben's time wrapping up a little bit in the league? You know, he's got 2-3 years left, maybe, especially at his peak.
I see that most explicitly in terms of how they are very eager to wrap up Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown's contract situations. Obviously, they've done Brown's. Not that you wouldn't want to do that anyway, but I think there's a clear window that's probably down to about 2 years now before Ben's knees, ankles, flips, etc. go.
Yeah.
I mean, part of what's made him such almost like a genre-defining quarterback all these years is that he's a big man who moves around, but being a big man who moves around wreaks havoc on one's joints. And, you know, he's not a guy who's going to become a check-down sort of quarterback. You know, they throw level screens sometimes, and it works, and that's cool, but he's going to do his, like, gunslinger thing.
Right.
Until he can't anymore. And if he gets to a point where he's doing that, but he can't step through his throws, which you saw a lot this past season. This wasn't a particularly good season for Ben Roethlisberger.
Mm-hmm.
Then his physical demise will happen rapidly. Though I guess you could argue it's been happening gradually since forever. But
right. And he's not the kind of guy who's going to redefine his game.
No, I mean, to a certain extent, you know, he's made some adjustments under Todd Haley and everything. That's been discussed to no end and back. But when Ben Roethlisberger hits the physical wall, it's not going to be pretty.
He's not going to be Peyton Manning and, you know, become a different kind of guy entirely and let the running game carry him a little bit more.
They don't have the Broncos defense. So.
Yeah, they don't have Von Miller. Yeah.
It's just not who he is, and it's not who the Steelers are. And that sounds like some like sports talk crap radio like maxim, but in this case, it's true.
Yeah, I agree with that. And sort of to let you have your day here, any last thoughts on the team or any exciting stories we should be thinking or watching for as you write about the off season?
The thing that fascinates me in a way that I won't pretend to understand, you know, definitively, is how the Steelers actually feel about this quarterback class. Because everyone and their mother around punditry and analysis will tell you this is a developmental class of quarterbacks. It's got a number of people that are reasonably developable. Developable, that's a word, sure.
It is now.
But no one that you would want to be your year one starter, which is fine. The Steelers don't need a year one starter. So I keep coming back to, you know, at some point, is there going to be a run on quarterbacks? Like, how many quarterbacks are going to go in the first round? I've seen projections where it's 3, with the Notre Dame guy being Kaiser.
Kaiser, right?
Yeah. You know, him going after Watson and after Trubisky. But it is interesting to me because I think if the Steelers can get the 4th to 6th best quarterback in the draft, they might do it. You know, they didn't throw Landry Jones a bunch of money. They threw him 2 years, $4 million, $500,000.
It's only a 2-year contract.
Yeah, so I don't think the Steelers are above drafting a quarterback this year, but I cannot for the life of me understand how deep into this class goes in terms of quarterbacks, but really, and this is more important, how the rest of the league feels. Because it's one thing to say, you know, this class isn't that good, but everybody needs a quarterback, and you can talk yourself into excitement about, you know, just about anybody who gets the ball and throws it in college. So
yeah. And there's one in their backyard. Yeah. Peterman is one of those guys that could.
That's true.
So, who knows? I mean, they could reach. You know, they can go and they got an extra third to play with.
Yeah, what a great year to have an extra third.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Colbert was obviously made up about it, but I mean, especially with the depth at running back and wide receiver this year, it's a perfect time to get a guy who's not going to, you know, jump off the tape into someone's draft board, but would be a really viable option. And look, we don't know what's going to happen with D'Angelo Williams. Fitzgerald Toussaint is, you know, just he's there. He's solid, but they clearly don't want to play him unless they have to. So
let Carlos Williams go. James Conner's another guy in the backyard.
He is, and I could see that one too. I know Mike Mann said he has him as a third day guy, so why not? But yeah, I mean, as far as quarterbacks go, the Steelers met with Josh Dobbs at the Combine, met with Brad Kayed, and met with Deshaun Kaiser. I don't know about the bigger names, but I do know they met with at least those three. I think Cooper Rush at Central Michigan as well. So, look, I mean, they're going to do their due diligence, and Landry Jones may have some competition for that second game day spot this year. But someone posed a question to me on Twitter the other day. They were like, hey, over under 5.5 games that Landry Jones plays in the next 2 years.
Oh,
and
over 2 years.
Under, but not in the next 2 years, yeah. And I said under, but the question isn't. The better question is over and under 5.5 games that Ben Roethlisberger misses in the next 2 years. And because the Steelers could very easily draft someone over Landry Jones and
right.
be the guy coming in for him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Ben Roethlisberger could very easily miss that many games. I don't know the answer to either question, obviously.
So before I let you go, any stories we should be watching out for? Any more cool stuff to look out for? Or are you still just mapping out your off-season storylines?
Oh, in terms of what I'm going to be writing about. Yeah, sure. I would keep an eye on the Ross Cockrell sweepstakes, which is kind of a funny thing to say, but it's relevant because, decent cornerbacks. But things I'm working on, I'm looking at a story about how teams sort of scout guys off the field in terms of, when they think they have background issues, how they go about that. I'm working on a thing about how players train for the combine and the draft and that whole circuit, depending on what their situation is on a number of levels, whether it be their academics, their location, where they think their draft stock is, their agent, and how this whole sub-industry of pre-draft training has cropped up in the past 15 years and how that's affected the decisions that players make in terms of who they're going to be represented by and what they want to do in the months between the end of their senior season, or their last season, I should say,
right?
And trying to get drafted for the NFL. There's a lot of strength on that one, and yeah, it's going to cost me some sleep. So I hope you read it when it happens.
Well, I will. Make sure you tweet those out because I watch that stuff. So make sure you do that. And hey, thanks for coming on, Jacob. I really appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to seeing more stories over the weeks and months.
Hey, I appreciate it. I'm going to shout out my Twitter though.
Yeah.
It's since we're talking about it, it's Jacob_Klinger_ there's 2 underscores. Klinger spelled like the guy from MASH. So for my older Twitter using audience, that's where I'm at.
Deal. All right, and we'll make sure to tweet this out, and so people know that when I get this out there too. So thanks again.
Thanks, man. You too.
All right, you take care now.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.